And then we take it a step further. And we know that I've talked about this before and I've gotten flack for it and it's gone viral in Mexico. The Sheinbaum administration could be a potential political target here with this plea deal. Claudia Sheinbaum has publicly objected to the leniency deals for the Chapitos. This has been like a constant back and forth over the past couple of days. She's called them incoherent, especially regarding the deaths of Mexican soldiers in Ovidio's capture. What we do know about Sheinbaum, and I've talked about this before and it's very obvious, is that she's very much about nationalism, right? You know, maintaining Mexico's autonomy, even though arguing that Mexico even has autonomy when it has this cartel shadow government is really questionable, right? I guess that's a topic for another day. But Sheinbaum has directly had this public back and forth and disagreement with Ovidio's lawyer, her unhappiness with the U.S. administration and the dealings with Ovidio and the family members. They were allegedly left in the dark about the 17 family members being let into the U.S. with visas and protection. Her administration was very unhappy about that. And now here we go again. And the U.S. is not addressing these grievances by Sheinbaum. They are just continue to mosey along, continuing their process with how they're dealing with this case. And Mexico is essentially left out. Claudia Sheinbaum has publicly objected to the leniency deals for the Chapitos. This has been like a constant back and forth over the past couple of days. She's called them incoherent, especially regarding the deaths of Mexican soldiers in Ovidio's capture. What we do know about Sheinbaum, and I've talked about this before and it's very obvious, is that she's very much about nationalism, right? You know, maintaining Mexico's autonomy, even though arguing that Mexico even has autonomy when it has this cartel shadow government is really questionable, right? I guess that's a topic for another day. But Sheinbaum has directly had this public back and forth and disagreement with Ovidio's lawyer, her unhappiness with the U.S. administration and the dealings with Ovidio and the family members. They were allegedly left in the dark about the 17 family members being let into the U.S. with visas and protection. Her administration was very unhappy about that. And now here we go again. And the U.S. is not addressing these grievances by Sheinbaum. They are just continue to mosey along, continuing their process with how they're dealing with this case. And Mexico is essentially left out. Now, two arguments for this, right? First being, I sort of understand, I do understand, I can recognize that when you're dealing with such high-level organized criminals from a country that has a known level of corruption and impunity, you almost do need to leave them in the dark in order to ensure that the integrity of the case and investigations is maintained. While at the same time, though, there are these really profound negotiations going on with these very criminals that is leading to a lot of protections for them. We've seen how it's worked before with U.S. intelligence over the course of the years, because oftentimes negotiations are happening in order to retrieve deeper, perhaps darker information in order to reach another target. But of course, this doesn't necessarily mean that this is the ideal situation in dealing with these criminals. And I think Ovidio likely went into this with a game plan. He knew, his dad had been through it. He knew how he could negotiate. He knew how he could get off. And he probably had a shit ton of information in his back pocket ready to start these negotiations and ready to ensure that his sentencing would be as lenient as possible. Now, this controversy over the cooperation has led to some U.S. Mexico political fallout, as I kind of briefly mentioned here. Critics are questioning whether cooperating with one of the world's top fentanyl traffickers amid record U.S. overdose deaths is even ethical. I mean, I'm questioning it. What is the end goal here? What does justice mean? What picture is the U.S. painting of justice when we're just seeing this constant negotiation? And then Mexican authorities are reportedly demanding input in the plea deal process, which that's never going to happen if we're being for real. So Ovidio's lawyer, Jeffrey Lichtman, accused Sheinbaum of acting as a PR arm for rival cartel factions, notably El Mayo's faction of the Sinaloa Cartel. Lichtman and Sheinbaum have been going back and forth over the past couple of days. It is tit for tat at this point. Sheinbaum rebutted his claims, saying, there's no collusion with anyone, and she called for defamation charges against Lichtman. Lichtman doesn't give a shit. It's very obvious in their very public discourse and back and forth. It's also important to keep in mind that Ovidio, in a way, was celebrated as like a narco culture icon. He had all of Culiacan, well, not all of Culiacan, but there was like, the Culiacanazo of 2019 was very significant. You had a lot of people fighting for this guy. Then, as a result of that, his arrests and releases have literally become symbols of impunity and cartel resilience. And now, the way that he is essentially running his deal and negotiations with the U.S. government, whether you like it or not, this is setting a precedent for future cases of similar significance. It's actually wild. It has led to some criticisms and some open discourse about the snitch system. People are saying that the U.S. approach essentially allows traffickers to buy down life sentences with intelligence, money, and basically avoid accountability for drug deaths and cartel violence. The likely outcome here with Ovidio is that he walks free in his 40s in the U.S., protected, wealthy, and with his whole family. It makes all of his actions just seem like completely justified. He made a shit ton of money. He has garnered so much power, saved his family. You spend 10 years locked up, what's the big deal? He'll probably still walk out with more money than most people make in their lifetimes. I mean, come on. Now, for the broader implications, this certainly signifies a potential major U.S. strategy, okay? If Ovidio offers actionable intelligence on high-level Mexican political corruption, it would certainly justify the plea, and we would see this massive crackdown on Mexican politicians. And you guys know me, I'm a big proponent for justice when it comes to cracking down on people who are supposed to maintain such a high level of integrity and they have such a high level of responsibility to care for people, and they're doing just the opposite. Fuck yeah. Go. Get them. Improve the lives of innocent Mexican people who have become the collateral victims of this war. So that's like an ideal but also very significant outcome. It could also catalyze an unprecedented U.S. indictment against a Mexican official or ex-president. This would obviously trigger some serious diplomatic tension, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. And I would be so curious to see Sheinbaum's reaction and the level of fallout that we would see from this. And if we are looking at the bigger picture, I think cracking down on the very individuals who are allowing these criminals to continue to operate and have this level of impunity That makes sense as an end goal. So the domestic U.S. narrative, right? President Donald Trump has used the case to basically push this hardline anti-cartel stance. We've seen this from his previous term and now particularly since January. He's literally framing it as a national security and terrorism issue, which it is. Canada followed suit, and globally, this has essentially exploded. I mean, this has always been on the global playing field and big screen, but now more than ever before, we're seeing this really come to a head. And of course, the case plays into the U.S. debates, electoral debates, rather, over border security and fentanyl deaths. So the key here in the big picture, if we're really going to be honest and humanize this story, the bigger picture here is, what is Ovidio's plea deal and his case going to mean for the victims of the very crimes that he perpetrated, committed, or profited off of, and allowed so many others to do the same? Let's see how this goes. I'm going to keep you guys updated because this shit's about to get real interesting, more than it already is. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe and rate this podcast. I'm Katarina Szulc, Borderland, Dispatches, an Ironclad original. And as always, see you next time.